Well, I've spent 32 years hunting hackers. The enemies have completely changed. We don't have these teenage boys writing viruses for fun anymore. Most of the attackers are after money.
And you talked about cybercrime unicorns. Could you elaborate on that?
Yeah. Originally, this term was more like a joke. They're making serious money and they're investing that money into their attacks. Data is the most valuable property we
people
own.
Say that all the time.
Yeah. Data is money. Data is the new oil. However, they never estimate the value of the data.
はい、こんにちは。ピボットの竹下です。今日はですね、世界的なサイバーセキュリティの専門家のミッコ・ヒッポネンさんにフィンランドからわざわざ、この東京のピボットのスタジオまで来てもらいました。ミッコ・ヒッポネンはですね、本当に世界で有名なんですけど、デジタルサイバーセキュリティの、名探偵コナンみたいな方で、もう30年間ずっとこのサイバー犯罪を追いかけ続けた人なんですよね。で、彼にちょっと2つのことを聞いてみたいと思います。1つはですね、最近デジタル犯罪、サイバー犯罪のユニコーンが出てきていると。ユニコーンってスタートアップで10億ドル以上の企業を言いますけれど、これで資金力もあって、しかもウェブサイトに企業から盗んだ情報を公開するぞと脅してですね、それで資金調達をしている新しいタイプの犯罪組織が出ていく。この話を聞きたいと。で、2つ目は、やはりチャット GPT を使ったサイバー犯罪というのはすでに始まっているらしいので、AI とサイバー犯罪が結びつくとどうなるかということを聞いてみたいと思います。本当にこの自分たちの身を守るためにも、ぜひ最先端の話、なかなか聞けない話があると思いますので、本人に聞いてみたいと思います。Mikko Hipponen, welcome to Pivot.
Thank you very much and thanks for having me.
Yes. So you're here in Japan. So what's your purpose of your visit?
Well, first of all, I always love coming to Japan. It's one of my favorite countries, one of my favorite cultures. I'm also a gamer, so I'm a big fan of Japanese gaming culture. But this time around, the reason why I'm here is my new book. So I wrote a book which came out in English in August last year, and now it's been translated to Japanese. And I'm really proud to have my book available here for Japanese audience.
Great. So the title of the book is インターネットの敵とは誰か. So it literally means who is the enemy of internet.
That's right.
What's the meaning of this title?
Well, I've spent 32 years hunting hackers, looking at attackers who try to break into our computers, the virus writers, malware writers, spammers, organized online crime gangs, and lately government intelligence agencies and militaries which use online attacks. And I'm telling the stories behind these attackers in my book. I'm telling the things I've learned over the last 30 years and then make some guesses about where we will be going next.
So you've been tracking cybercrimes for 30 years. So what's the difference between the first time of the year you have started your job and now we have ChatGPT and AI?
It's been a revolution. I mean, the world has changed. If someone would have told me in 1991, when I started my career, where we will end in 30 or 32 years, everything would have sounded like science fiction. The world has really changed. We were still living in offline world. Back then, today, everything is online. All the devices we buy are connected to this global internet, and the people doing online attacks have completely changed. I always carry with me one of these.
Wow, that's very, it's like history.
Vintage. Have you ever used these?
Yes, it's a floppy disk.
Yes. So when I go to universities, for example, the students have never seen one of these. They don't really know. I tell them it's the USB thumb drive of the 1990s.
That's funny.
But this is how I started. I mean, this is a genuine infected floppy, which I analyzed maybe in 1992. This one is infected with Brain, which is the very first PC virus we ever found. And the reason why I always carry one of these with me is to remind myself of where I'm coming from and how much the world has changed. Back then, in the 1980s, 1990s, all the viruses we found were written by teenage boys who were writing viruses for fun. And these viruses were spreading around the world physically when people traveled, because we didn't have email or web or any of these online connectivity tools. So for a virus like this to spread from Tokyo to Helsinki, which is where I live, someone would have to hop on a Japan Airlines or Finnair flight and fly from one city to another carrying one of these. So the spreading speeds were really slow.
Right.
Today, malware outbreaks go around the world in minutes. And the enemies have completely changed. We don't have these teenage boys writing viruses for fun anymore. Most of the attackers are after money.
I see. So decades ago it was teenage boys, now cyber attackers. How about ChatGPT? Are they our enemies?
ChatGPT and generative AI in general is going to be the next big revolution in technology. Like if we take a step back and look at how technology changes our world. We have these big shifts. We got the industrial revolution, then we got the electricity revolution, 30 years ago, internet revolution, and the next one will be AI revolution. And the AI revolution is going to be bigger than the internet revolution. And internet changed everything for the better and also for the worse. It changed our risks and it changed crime. We went from local crime to global crime. And exactly in the same way, artificial intelligence, generative AI, and machine learning is going to change the world for the better and for the worse.
Do you think people will ask ChatGPT to create a malware or...
Already happened.
Already happened.
That's already happened.
What are you seeing right now?
We found the very first malware using ChatGPT in April. So just a couple of weeks ago. The first one is called LL Morpher, and it's a Python worm. It replicates on your computer, searches for Python files, script files, and then copies its own functions into those files. So that's how it replicates. When you run the infected file, it repeats the same and infects more files. But the trick is, when it copies its own functions into clean files, it doesn't copy them directly. Instead, it has an English language description of the functionality, and then it has an API key, and it calls OpenAI's servers and asks GPT to write a function which does this, 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 and this, which means the code is different every time, and it would be trivial to modify this to write it in any languages you can imagine, because GPT writes all programming languages more or less. And this is just the beginning. We will be seeing much more attacks which are using machine learning, not just malware, but complete automations of malware campaigns, deepfake attacks, deepfake voice attacks over phone, deepfake video attacks over Zoom and Teams. And we probably can't even imagine what this technology can be used for. It's getting smarter every day.
So is it possible to track that malware or ChatGPT creating all this?
Right now, the situation is manageable. You see large language models like ChatGPT, they are too large, they are closed, they are client-server architecture. You cannot download ChatGPT. You can only use it online. So if you are offline, it doesn't work. You have to have it available online, which means users of ChatGPT have to have an account. They have to have an API key. Which means if you misuse the service, if you use it to create malware, OpenAI can blacklist you. They can kick you out. Of course, you can register a new account, get a new key, but they can kick you out again. That's the solution for now. However, if we look a little bit further into future, eventually these models will be small enough, or our storage systems will become bigger. One day we will find a worm which carries a large language model inside of it. It's going to be massive. It's going to be huge by today's standards. But clearly, one day that will happen. So that's not a permanent, there's nothing permanent in this field. It's a game of cat and mouse. We make up new defenses. Our attackers will find ways around them.
So who is behind the scenes? Who's trying to use ChatGPT in that way?
This particular case, it's interesting because most malware is being written by organized online crime gangs, and they do it for money. This particular malware is written by a malware writer who goes by the nickname SPTH, which is an abbreviation, for second part to hell. Don't ask me where the name comes from, I don't know. But this is a malware writer who's been around for many years, and clearly he's a little bit unusual, or she is unusual.
You don't know the gender, or he or she.
I know nothing about the identity or even the country where they're from. But we do know that they are writing groundbreaking malware which breaks rules or creates something new. I mean, ChatGPT using malware is an example of that. And then they go and publish it on GitHub. And that's exactly what happened here. So it's a little bit unusual because that malware is not being used to make money. Most new malware is written to steal. This malware just replicates and shows that ChatGPT can be used to create malware.
So what's his or her motivation? Because in your book, you illustrated a teenage boy using Cinder ladder. So his motivation was to spread his idea from a rural area to California. That was his happiness or motivation. Right. So what's this person's...
Why is SPTH doing it? Academic challenge would be my definition, or intellectual challenge. Wants to do something which hasn't been done before. And he wants to get credit for it. He has his...
So he wants to like surprise the world or give impact or...
I'll give you an example. One of the previous viruses they wrote was infecting DNA, the kind of DNA that we are built out of, because there are DNA readers and DNA printers. And he wrote a computer virus which was able to infect the sequences of DNA. And when you would use a printer to print physical DNA, it would have been infected by a computer virus. And if that sounds scary, it is. Just like GPT-enabled malware is scary. So none of this is a good idea, but it's interesting and it's a challenge and someone's going to do it. And that's what's happening here.
And you talked about cybercrime unicorns. Could you elaborate on that?
Yeah. Originally, this term was more like a joke. I started speaking about cybercrime unicorns 5 years ago or so. I started seeing that the wealthiest online gangs are becoming really wealthy, and partially because they make so much money with ransomware and other related attacks, and the other reason being that they like to keep their wealth in Bitcoin. And they've had a lot of Bitcoins already years ago, and of course valuations have been growing up in the long run quite a bit. If you had, $1 million in Bitcoins 5 years ago, now you have, 10 million or 50 million, depending on when you bought them. And this means that they are becoming wealthy enough that if these would be companies, like startup technology companies, we would probably speak about startup unicorns. Now, I'm not expecting any of these cybercrime gangs to go public or any of that. So it's like I said, originally was more like a joke, but it has become a reality. When we look at the wealthiest, the biggest cybercrime groups in the world, groups like CLOP, Alpha, RansomX, or Quantum, all of them probably are cybercrime unicorns. They are professional organizations, organized crime gangs. They have tens, maybe even hundreds of members, employees, affiliates. They have physical data centers that they control.
So it's like a startup company.
Or like a real world crime gang. Mafia, Yakuza, whatever you want to call it. But of course, these are virtual gangs. They probably rarely have any links to real world crime or traditional crime gangs.
So do you mean unicorns in the sense of startup, which worth $1 billion? Is that the term?
That's the idea. That's just to make people think about just how wealthy and how powerful these cybercrime gangs have become. This is not small money. They're making serious money and they're investing that money into their attacks.
Interesting.
And this is also one of the reasons why I believe that we will see more automation and machine learning in malware attacks as well, because these gangs have the money to hire professionals to build the level of automation you would need to build to run your malware campaigns completely automated.
So like unicorns, are they hiring engineers or scientists? Or?
Sure. So for example, Lockbit. Lockbit is one of the bigger gangs, maybe right now the biggest cybercrime gang in the world. They're headquartered in Moscow. They have an HR department.
HR department?
They have an HR department. They're recruiting criminals. And they have their own data centers. They have, we think, lawyers. They are running their operation professionally and investing into the growth of the operation.
So I have like a screenshot of Lockbit 3.0. So for the viewers who are not quite familiar with this, can we say company or what can you say this?
It's an organized crime.
Organized crime. So could you elaborate on this? So they're listing, I see like Richard Wolff, Kearney.com, very famous companies on the list. What's this website?
This is what we call a leak site. It's a website, but it's running in the Tor hidden service, so it's not directly accessible from a normal browser, and you can't Google for it. But if you are accessing the Tor hidden service, then you'll find their site, and it lists their victims. Lockbit is a ransomware operation. They've been operating for 4 years now. They deploy ransomware against large companies, large enterprises, all kinds of companies in all areas of business all over the world. If you look at some of the listed victims on this screenshot, there's companies from USA, Canada, Germany, Costa Rica, Argentina, India. And some of them are like grocery stores, chains. Others are like metal manufacturing or car dealerships. So all kinds of companies. They've broken into their networks. They've stolen their emails. They've stolen their document archives. Then they've encrypted everything. All the laptops, all the desktops, all the servers, all the backups, or all the cloud instances. And then they leave a ransom note. And it's not just that you have to pay a ransom in Bitcoin to get your files back. Of course, in Bitcoin, that's how they do it. The second trick is that if you don't pay, they will leak the stolen files on this website.
Is that true?
They've done it hundreds of times. If you scroll down this website, you'll see hundreds of companies around the world which have been victimized by this one single gang. When you look at the biggest gangs, they all do the same. They all have hundreds of victims. This is growing like hell, and they're making a lot of money with it. And for example, one of those companies listed, it has 18 days to pay the ransom, and the ransom for their data is $2 million.
So let me clarify this. So there's a number on it. It says 18 days. It means 18 days until they release the documents.
That's right. If you pay $2 million, they won't release the files. If you don't pay, your email archives and document history will be available for anybody to download from this website. That's how they twist your arm.
So this is public on the internet.
It's not just public. They're actually trying to promote it. These gangs, like Lockbit, the reason why they have a website is to build a reputation. They build a brand.
A brand.
I mean, there's a logo. They have a logo.
Yeah.
They have a name.
And this website looks like a common e-commerce website.
It's a nicely built site because they're professionals.
Yeah.
And the reason why they need a brand is that they need a reputation which is scary, but also a reputation that they're what we call honest criminals.
Honest criminals.
Which means you have to know that if you pay the ransom, that you will get your files back, and they will not leak your files, and they will not attack you again. That's what they promise. They promise that, you pay, we'll never attack you again. And you need to know that they keep their word. And they do. I mean, that's how they built their reputation. If you speak to older, previous victims, they will tell you the story that, we were hit by a Lockbit, they encrypted our backups, we were all, our operations, our factories were down. Then we paid the ransom and we got a decryption program. We got everything back. And then we had some corrupted servers which weren't recovering, but Lockbit's technical support worked with our guys and we recovered all the files. 5 out of 5 would recommend. That's the kind of reputation they're looking for. So they need a reputation that they are scary, but if you pay, it's going to be okay. If they wouldn't deliver what they promise, nobody would pay the ransom.
So if I were a CEO and I get their files on the Lockbit and it says my company name, it says 5 days, 14 minutes left, and you have to pay $200 million something. So, and if they build trust, if I were a CEO, maybe I would decide to pay the ransom. How the companies are reacting so far?
This is a great question. I mean, it's really easy to say that never pay the ransom. That's what we always advise we get a lot of contacts from companies which have been hit around the world, and we help them to recover. And of course, our advice is always that don't pay. If you pay, the problem only becomes bigger.
Right.
That's really easy to say. It's actually kind of hard to do because the stolen information includes all kinds of confidential information. For example, it includes the emails of your employees exchanging emails with the corporate healthcare about private health issues. All of that is going to be public if you don't pay. So it's a hard decision to make. But even more interestingly, what's the value of your data? Companies, board members, leadership team members, they always tell you that, data is the most valuable property we own.
Yeah, people say that all the time.
Yeah. Data is money.
Yeah.
Data is the new oil. However, they never estimate the value of the data of the company, that the data that the company is holding, until they end up on this website. Then they very concretely have to decide that is our data worth $5 million or is it not? That's the first time they have to do it.
So do they pay?
Some of them do. We know that, it's pretty obvious that some of them do. If nobody would pay, this problem wouldn't exist.
Right.
So clearly people are paying. And when we look at the profits of these gangs, they're making tens of millions, hundreds of millions in some cases. So yeah, this works. Unfortunately, it works, which means this problem isn't going to go away anytime soon. And when we look at how the problem started, the first ransomware using Bitcoin was found 10 years ago. Originally, it was just targeting home users. So it wasn't that going after companies. It was just hitting home computers, which are really easy to infect because home computers don't have much security. And the data they were encrypting was like holiday images or your photo roll, and they were asking for $200 or $300. It's completely changed. Now home users are not being targeted at all, and instead they go after these large corporate and enterprise targets.
I see. So it's more organized, it's scaling at a rapid scale.
Well, the best example I have is that right as we're recording this, yesterday there was a hit from Klopp, the second largest cybercrime unicorn in the world. They are using a brand new vulnerability in an enterprise software, and they've had like 80 new victims within a week. 2 of the victims are law enforcement officers. So criminals are hitting the cops with their attacks. Can you imagine that? That's so, how bad it is.
That's so surreal.
Yeah.
Aren't there any ways to put them into jail? We know their website, their company, we know their logo.
In 2019, we saw one single Russian ransomware group, REvil, hit major targets in USA, including Colonial Pipeline and JBS Foods, second largest oil and gas network in USA, the world's largest meat producer. They went down because of their ransomware attacks. And after those attacks, the US State Department issued a $10 million bounty for information leading to arrests of the members of this group. And that worked like a charm because they weren't just offering money, they were also offering immunity from prosecution. Now, imagine for a second that you are a member of this crime gang. You read the news. They're offering $10 million for me if I rat my friends. If I do it, all my friends go to jail, but I'm getting immunity. I get $10 million.
And immunity.
Yes, exactly. And then you realize, all my friends are reading the news as well. One of them is going to do it. I should do it first. And this worked. We saw series of arrests of Russian criminals made by Russian law enforcement inside Russia during October, November, December of 2019. I started calling this the cybercrime unicorn hunting season because there were so many arrests. It looked great. Then, 27th of February 2020, Russia invades Ukraine.
Right.
The war restarted and reignited. The aggression from Russia against Ukraine escalated and the arrests stopped. And we don't have concrete evidence, but it seems that at least some of the cyber criminals which were arrested by Russian law enforcement are no longer arrested. And so the hunting season lasted only a few precious months and it's over now.
I see. Do you think it will be more difficult to track these criminals because we need cooperation from the Russian government, but after the war, which is obviously difficult, do you see that kind of effect?
That's the problem. We don't have global laws, so we need interaction and cooperation from local law enforcement. And it's hard. It's the hardest problem we have. And we have to remember, not all malware writers come from Russia. This is a bigger problem. We've had malware writers right here in Japan. We've had ransomware made here in Japan. It exists. It's not as big a problem, but it is a real problem. And when you look at countries where we see cybercrime as a growing problem, then we see countries like Vietnam, which is growing very quickly, many parts of Africa, which are growing very quickly. So developing nations where people with technical skills might find out that the easiest way to make a lot of money is to go into life of online crime. And the most important thing we should be doing is to show them that crime doesn't pay, not even in online world. So we really should be doing much better in international law enforcement cooperation, in getting more arrests and putting more of these criminals behind the bars.
So why are those people getting into this crime? Are they thinking that this pays or it's an easy way to make money?
It is an easy way to make money. It's also illegal, so people shouldn't even consider it, but clearly some of them do. The challenge is that we see many of the successful cyber criminals boast with their proceedings. They have Instagram accounts, they're posting images of themselves with stacks of dollars, driving around in Ferraris.
So they're like a celebrity or a kind of hero.
They like to portray themselves as some kind of Robin Hood, so what have you. It must be tempting, especially if you are living in a poor country and you have technical skills and you don't seem to be finding right opportunities for yourself. If you know how to program, if you understand how network protocols work and you're living in Tokyo or Osaka or London or San Francisco, you can easily get a good job with your skills. If you have the same skills and you're somewhere in Siberia or countryside of China or slums of Sao Paulo, the easiest way to make a lot of money is to go to online crime. North Korea is the only country in the world where the government is using cyber attacks to make money. 50% of the ballistic missile nuclear program of North Korea is funded with cybercrime.
In terms of cybersecurity, how's Japan doing?
This is a highly technical country. The biggest downside I see in cybersecurity for Japanese companies is the large amount of legacy systems.
Do you think internet was good for human beings or was it a bad thing?
Was it a mistake?
Was a mistake.